Hello, everyone. So, going to take a look at the Weibo stock, WB, Chinese social media company. Um, and you that just watched the IQ, um, kind of look at the breakdown of the chart in that you're going to see a lot of very similar context here in WB. We are really seeing right now a lot of the same patterns and stuff like that from a lot of the Chinese stocks, especially the new IPO ones, HUYA, YY, of course IQ, and those mostly things, especially right from the new IPOs, they raced up pretty quick. I found pullback. So here we'll take a look at WB. So we've got the weekly chart here using TC2000. I try to keep it pretty simple with the lines and stuff on here. So from from the IPO price. In that, we've got nice cut through trend line here. So basically right through the middle of the stock in that, and you can see kind of tapped it early on, broke it but couldn't close above it. In that, kind of trend along, tapped a few times finally, broke it on extreme volume, held it, and then was off to the races. So here we go with our nice trend line. In that, of course, then we have this huge pump here from the start, or really, over the last almost about a year, 6 months here into the early parts of this year into January, we've got this huge run up of the stock, and now since then have pulled back. You do see some price action here once it pulled back and got to VWAP. So nice little pullback to VWAP, kind of try to make a move back up there, and then of course failed, broke VWAP and came back down right here. So last week was earnings for anyone that follows the stock. We had earnings last week on Monday on August 8th on Wednesday morning was earnings in that. So you saw the stock actually pull up a little bit early in the week, and then fall back down, and of course finish the week closing below the trend line. Definitely an ominous kind of thing there for that stock. So knew more pain was coming at that point in there. So the question then being, now that we are below the trend line, is where are we going, and what can we expect from the stock? So of course, just looking at some pivot lines and stuff like that, right, we'll see the pivot here, which you notice all the price action around it. So of course fell through that, ripped back up, retested the pivot, and then at the start of the week, and then fell with earnings. Actually, if I flip that over to the day chart, right, you can see it shooting up and basically opening at that pivot, and then deciding, even though it had really good earnings, beating most estimates in that, decided that it doesn't like the China market right now. It doesn't like, what's going on with the devaluation of the yuan, the trade war tension, the whole really market's in a bear market now. And so it decided going down. So, of course, then shot down, broke the trend line in a huge loss for a day, tapped it a little bit, retested it, and then decided, nope, no go, and has since fallen pretty heavily. So as we continue the downward trend, where do we go from here? Of course, next trend line, going to see about, right here in the 66 range. It's just an estimate. So you would assume the next fall, of course, would be into this 66 pivot range here. That is a pretty strong pivot, really, the way it came off the line there. So you'd like to see it hold that, as well. But so we'll readjust and review once again once we get down to this 66 level, and see what kind of rebound, what kind of price action we get once we hit this pivot. The hope, of course, would be that you get a spike off the pivot, kind of two different things you see here. Get a spike off the pivot, break back, and then immediately break up, right? So, here, break, and then immediately go forward. So that's what we'll be hoping for. But until then, we hold tight and wait for it to fall another really $10 in this. So for anyone that's bullish right now on the stock, I actually am pretty bullish long term on the stock. I love the revenue increases in the stock. The stock is continuing to make more and more money in that, and I would assume that's going to continue. In that, we have a social media problem here in the United States, especially with companies like Facebook, Twitter, and stuff selling our data. That is most definitely not a problem in China. In fact, they give it all to the government for free. So of course, selling it to the advertisers and stuff like that is not a problem. So you are seeing a lot of revenue growth in those areas for this stock. So I do like it. I think it is growing its revenue pretty quick, and it should be back at highs point once this issues with the China market are resolved. But in the meantime, even if you are bearish, it makes sense to open up some calls, maybe $70 or $65, or not calls, puts, $70 puts in the short term, maybe something for around October, November puts, and ride the wave. I like to put, when stocks are in these downtrends, and I do see pivots coming, I like to put, calls around those pivots, buy them out early and ride the wave down. If the stock decides here that this is as low as it's going and it wants to turn, maybe some trade news happens, something goes on, and it decides to turn around, that's fine. I own long-term calls or own shares and be bullish on the stock, but at the same time, you own a few of these puts, so that if you are losing money, you do have kind of that a little bit of income from those puts. And then I like to go ahead and flip those puts once they get down into that price and they've gone up in value. I like to flip them over to the long-term calls in that, and then kind of bolster my position in there. So instead of just waiting, if you do believe it from the chart that is going to 66, buy a couple puts, write it down, and then flip those over and write it back up. So nothing crazy with the chart. I know a lot of people want to call this like a pump and dump and market manipulators and all of those things. But what you've got is a stock that made an astonishing run, just a ridiculous, run up, especially over the past 2 years. Right? If you start at January, to the high there, right, you're up 200%. So it is a crazy run in there. And so, of course, you're going to have a pullback. And it decided it was going to pull back all the way to VWAP, really, with last earnings. And then it decided it was going to pull back to the long-term trend line, which makes a lot of sense. And then, of course, weakness decided it's going to push it below the trend line. So now we are definitely in a downtrend. So ride out this wave and wait for it to break trend line on its way back up and steal some more money. All right. Thanks, everyone.